Okay, today we are doing 9-6 circles. So now remember, we're doing bits and pieces of chapter 9 because a lot of the information you already know, and in fact today's lesson is something that hopefully will be quick and fast and just a refresher for you because you have done these before. Okay, so we are talking about circumference today. Remember that a circle is a set of all points that are the same distance from a given point called the center of the circle. So that's our definition for circle. Then also you need to remember that the radius is a segment that has one endpoint at the center and the other point on the circle. So I give you a picture, you see the drawing, you get the idea. So nothing new so far, right? Okay, then remember a chord is a segment whose endpoints are on the circle. So this is a representative of what a chord would look like. And then the diameter is a chord, but the difference is that the chord passes through the center of the circle and creates the diameter. Okay, so you know all of this, right? This is just a refresher for you. Then remember the last thing that I want you to know, because we're going to use this, is we're talking about circumference, which is the distance around the circle. So remember, we're talking about the distance around. Now you need to remember also that the ratio of every circle's circumference c to its diameter d is the same. It has a special symbol which we call pi, which is pronounced pi. So the symbol looks like this, but we pronounce it pi. And we're going to use 3.14 when we're working with decimals, or if we're working with fractions, we're going to work with 22/7. Okay, so that might be a little different. I don't know that you've used 22/7 before, have you?
No.
Did you? Okay, so either or. However, if the problem starts with a fraction, you need to use 22/7 so that it ends as a fraction. If the problem starts as a whole number or a decimal, you may use 3.14. Now, just for the sake of proving it to yourself, take 22 divided by 7 on your calculator for me. What do you get?
3.14.
Okay, so it's just a different form of pi, correct? Okay, so 3.14 is a rounded number for pi. And remember when we talked about irrational numbers, remember pi was one of those numbers that was irrational? Okay, so whatever we use for pi is always going to be an approximation. It's not an exact unless we show it in terms of pi, which I'll talk about later. Okay? So moving on, then we're going to use 22/7 for pi when calculations involve fractions and 3.14 when they do not. These are the two formulas. Now this is the same formula. Okay, I tend to like using this one better. Circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. However, remember the formula cards that I gave you from the state that you're going to be using on ISAT? They use this formula here. So circumference is equal to 2 times the pi times the radius. Why are these the same thing? Somebody tell me why that's the same. So think about it. If I'm giving you two different formulas, how come I'm saying they're the same? How come, Nick?
Because the first one has radius, and radius is just half of the diameter. So
Okay.
we just multiply by 2.
Okay, so the radius times 2 is the same thing as the diameter, correct? So they're the same thing, it's just a different way of looking at it. I don't really care which one you use. However, keep in mind that this one right here is the one you're going to see on that formula card. So if you know that might be something that will mess you up when you look at that formula card, you might want to use this one so you don't miss it on ISATs. Okay? All right, questions so far? Now, here's one thing I would like to point out to you because I think a lot of people, and I don't know, maybe this has been answered, you can tell me, but have you ever wondered why you get to use 3.14 for every circle, no matter how big or how small? Doesn't that seem weird to you? Okay, so let me break it down visually for you so that you can understand it. Here's what circumference or why you're using the pi key. The diameter of your circle, so if I draw if I have a circle, the diameter, this distance across this right here, if I took this piece, let's say that I had a string, and I took that diameter, the length of that diameter, and I wrapped it around my circle, guess how many times it would wrap around the circle approximately? What do you think, Chris?
3.14.
So, right, it's approximately, it wraps around 3 times. So it doesn't matter how big or small your circle is. If my circle's this big, it's that diameter wrapped approximately 3 times around the circle. If my circle's this big, it's that big diameter. So do you see now where you get that 3.14? That diameter wraps around the circle approximately 3 times. That's why it's always the same, okay? All right, so moving on, you have some examples. Everyone have their on the other side of your paper, Megan.
I don't get why you have to use 22 divided by 7. Like, I know it makes 31.14, but...
Remember we've talked about if it starts as a fraction, you need to end it as a fraction. So if I'm using decimals, I won't get a fraction answer. So there are times where you're going to use a fraction answer, or you're going to use 22 over 7 because you want the end result to be a fraction. Other times, you can use the 3.14 decimal, okay? So what you want to remember, Megan, is if your question starts as a fraction, you're going to use 22 over 7. Otherwise, you can use 3.14.
Okay.
Okay? Now, here's the nice thing for you guys. You get to use your calculators.
Yeah.
Okay? So we will talk about it and discuss. I'll show you, but you also know how to put a fraction into your calculator, correct? Okay, so that's the one benefit about ISATs. We know that we're going to be able to use the calculator. All right, look at number 1. It says find the circumference of each circle with the given radius or diameter. So it gives me a diameter. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write my formula down. Circumference equals, and again, I don't care which formula you choose to use. I'm going to use the ISAT one. I actually prefer the other one, but for the sake of ISATs, we're going to use the 2 times pi times the radius. And then I'm just going to plug in the information that I need. Okay, now here's where you need to be careful. Notice in my formula, there's no D, there's no diameter, right? So I have got to go back and figure out, oh, they're actually looking for a radius. How do I figure out my radius from diameter? I do what? Skylar? Divide by 2. So if I divide this by 2, my radius is what? Is anybody with me today?
Yeah.
Mr. Reed, it's
8.
8. Good job. Okay? So just so that you're plugging in the correct thing, because it's really easy to make that error that you just plug it in and you don't think, oh, is it my diameter or is it my radius? Be careful. Okay, so circumference equals 2. Now, can I use 3.14 on this one? Yes, it doesn't start as a fraction, so 3.14 is fine. And then times my radius. Put it into your calculator. What do I get?
50.27.
Is it exact or approximate?
Approximately.
Okay, so does it tell me where I can round? Does it tell me where I should round?
No.
So if it doesn't, what am I going to do?
Approximately.
I'm going to use so I don't care where you round to, but you're going to show me that you're rounding by using your approximation sign. So 50.2, is that rounded correctly?
It's
It's
0.24.
50.24.
2.4, okay, thanks. Okay, and by the way, is this a measurement? Are we measuring something?
Yeah.
Should we label it?
Yes.
What are we going to label it, Nick?
Units.
Units. It doesn't tell me, but we do know it is some sort of measurement, so we must label it. We don't know if it's, inches, feet, yards, meters, whatever, but we know it's some sort of measurement.